So you know how they say everybody wants to be a gangster until it's time to do gangster stuff, right? Well, the same is true about warriors, okay? And we don't talk about this a lot, but everybody wants to believe they are a warrior, right? And I think it's just something innate with us as men that, you know, we feel like we can fight. And everybody feels like they can fight. Even if they have no training, no experience, right? Everybody feels like, you know, they can knock somebody out if they need to, okay? That is what it is. We all feel like we're warriors, but what does it truly mean to be a warrior? So today we're going to talk about that, and we're going to dive into Baba Baruti's book here, Mwalimu Baruti. His book is called Iwa, A Warrior's Character, okay? So I want you guys to, if you haven't yet, pick this book up on Alkebulan.com. That's Alkebulan.com. So I'll leave a link. You'll see it here at the bottom of the video. But we're going to go through this and talk about what it means to be a warrior as far as warrior character, okay? Because this is something we really want to emphasize, because it's not just about, you know, it's not just about punching and kicking, guys. And it's not just about learning how to fight and that kind of thing, which is all great, okay? But what we want to build as far as Yobè, right? African spirituality and combat science is that we want to build spiritual warriors, right? We want to be grounded and rooted as warriors of character, okay? So we have to base that on something, okay? So what's more important than your ability to fight is your ability to live, okay? How you walk your life day to day, that is a warrior's character. That is your Iwa, okay? And so we want to equip ourselves with the proper Iwa, with the proper warrior's character, so that we can go out and defend ourselves and protect our community and build for the next generation to come. So Iwa, warrior's character, is really all about action, okay? And you'll see the Andrinka symbols here on the front. We're going to talk a little bit about what these mean, because these symbols, I really want you guys to embody this, okay? I want you guys to put this on every single day of your life. So let's go through. Baba Baruti does a great job. He talks about, and I'm going to read the whole thing, obviously, but he talks about what these symbols mean here. So before we dive into the book, let's talk about what the cover means, okay? So the top left here, Akobin, right? This is the top left. I'm looking at it this way, okay? Top left, Akobin means readiness, okay? Top right, I'm not going to pronounce this correctly, but Duenimin means strength, okay? So we've got readiness and strength here, okay? The bottom left, Nasa, means excellence here, excellence. And then the last one here is Akoma Natalso, means love and unity, okay? Maybe you're mispronouncing some of these, okay? But I want you guys to all be aware of what these are. So we're talking about readiness, strength, excellence, love, and unity. That's what we want to embody as warriors, okay? And so it says here that though virtually all of the Andrinka symbols reflect some critical aspect, okay, because there's more symbols than just these four that we listed off, okay? They reflect some critical aspect of warriorhood. These four were selected by the students of the Akobin Institute as being those qualities of character that good warriors should most exhibit, right? Most exhibit towards themselves, each other, and the community. So this is why I want us to embody this, okay? So as you go throughout your day, or as you're waking up in the morning, I want you to think about readiness. I want you to think about strength, right? I want you to think about excellence. I want you to think about love and unity among your people, among your community, okay? And how you can exhibit that throughout your day. Now, let's get into this book here, Warrior's Character, and the intent of the book, and you know, some of the framework behind it. So again, guys, this is just part one in the series. We're going to go through this and really deep dive into this book. So if you get a chance, definitely pick this book up. So I'm going to start here on page 2. And page 2, Baba Baruti really kind of gets into the intention of the book and why he's writing it, okay? And so he says here, this book was written full of intent. African intent. That's what he says, okay? African intent. Consciously created to be a wake-up call for our warriors. It is an in-depth examination and explanation of what we should build and be like as African people. So I want to stop right there for a moment and talk about intention, because he says that he's writing this full of intent, meaning that, you know, he's not beating around the bush, okay? He's getting straight to the point. And it makes me, every time I read something, right? Anytime you guys do your own study, your own reading, examinations, which you should be doing, okay? If you are a warrior, okay? And we're talking about warriorship, okay? Which involves the Montu, right? Involves the martial arts, but it is beyond that in terms of how you live your life. as you guys study and read, you should be asking critical questions, right? You know, for example, with intent, what is your intention? Okay, Baba Baruti says that he's writing this book full of intent, African intent. Well, what is your intention throughout your life, as you live your life day to day? When you woke up this morning, what was your intention? Okay, was your intention African? Right? Okay, as he talks about here, African intention. So what is your intent? What that means is, what is your intention towards your community? Right? What did you intend to, you know, inspire the youth? Right? Did you intend to teach somebody today? Right? Did you have the intention to go out and correct misinformation? Right? Disinformation, propaganda, indoctrination, right? Some of the things that we're dealing with mentally and emotionally, psychologically, did you go out to try to help resolve some of that stuff? Did you go out and try to support a Black-owned business? Was that your intention, or is that your intention today? So ensure that whatever you do throughout your life, you do it on purpose, right? You have intention, because without intention, you're just like a boat without a sail, right? You're just blown and tossed by the waves and the wind, just going wherever the day takes you. So have intention, so at least you have a direction that you want to go towards, right? Same thing as fighting, right? Same thing, okay? You have an intention. You're not just standing in front of your opponent, right? Just with no, you know, don't know why you're there, right? You're gonna get beat up, okay? Make sure you live your life with intention. He says that it's meant to be a wake-up call for our warriors. And so it's important, because I think a lot of us are asleep, right? And it's just the reality of it. There's a lot going on to us, through us, around us. And most of us are not conscious of it. Most of us don't want to be conscious of it. Most of you who are watching this video may not want to be conscious of it. You may not want to think about it, because you just want to live your life in peace. You want to stay in your bubble. You don't want conflict. You don't want stress. You don't want problems, right? But living life as an African person is full of all of that, okay? And so you have to face that. And warriors face that, okay? If you're not a warrior, you're not going to face it, okay? But warriors face the reality of life, the reality of struggle, okay? As he says, this is an in-depth examination, explanation of what we should build and be like as African people. So he's talking about building, what we should build and be like as African people. So I like to say this isn't church, okay? This is not, you know, you go to church on Sundays. Some of you guys go to church on Sundays and you listen to a preacher, and we are really good at this as people of African descent. We love to go to church, and we're super religious. We get really emotional, very emotional high on Sunday, right? And maybe there's some action afterwards, but by and large, there's no action. We don't do anything. We're just super emotional about our spirituality. And this creates a very docile and a very impotent people, okay? And community, right? Because there's no action. There's nothing backing it behind what we do. So what we want to do is build something, okay? When we're talking about building, we're talking about building something that extends beyond our lifetime. So I'm not just talking about like community service, right? I'm not just talking about, you know, saying nice things. I'm not just talking about just being on social media and debating somebody, okay? I'm talking about actual work. What are you doing in your community that is going to extend beyond your lifetime? Because how we got to where we are now, our situation as people of African descent, this didn't happen in one lifetime. This didn't just happen in one generation, right? We got here over centuries, okay? And so until we start thinking, right, for eternity, until we start thinking over the course of centuries, okay? That's why, you know, shout out to Hoodie, Navigating Eternity. Make sure you guys check that out, navigatingeternity.com, okay? But until we start thinking about eternity, okay, and how we can build forever, right, beyond just our lifetimes, everything we build will continue to fall, will continue to crumble, right? Because we're only building for today, okay? If you're only building for today, it's not gonna last when the storm comes. And so we need to make sure that we're building these institutions. When the continent of Africa was first invaded by Europe, right? What happened? Okay, what happened? They came in with merchants, right? The businesses. They came in, you know, because they wanted to trade with the people, right? They wanted to trade with those on the African continent, quote unquote, trade, right? But they came in with the missionaries, right? This is the 3 M's we're talking about: the merchants, the missionaries, and the military, right? And so first they're doing their trading, doing business, then they're converting the Africans, but then, you know, when all else fails, they're bringing in the mercenaries and the military to take the land, right? And that's effectively what has happened to us. And so, but that happened because of institutions, right? They have an institution of the church, right? They have businesses, right, which are institutions, right? The military, an institution. And so we have to now build things within our own community that will advance us as a people collectively, right? So we have to build religious institutions, right, that are African-centered, right, that are centered upon teaching us a spiritual system that will empower us rather than disempower us. Instead of telling us Amazing Grace, how to save the wretch like me, instead of a spiritual system that tells us that we're a wretch and that we're worthless, we need a spiritual system that tells us that we're great, that we're powerful, that our history did not start with slavery. All right, let's keep it moving here. As a power, no nation stands without its traditions, right? What are your traditions, right? What are our traditions as African people? I mean, you probably don't know, right? Most of us don't know what our traditions are, right? If we even have any, okay? But no nation stands. We cannot stand without tradition, right? Tradition is rooted in our culture. Culture is identity. That is who we are. Powerful collectives always have a deep and abiding appreciation of self, right? It's what it says, right? Powerful collectives always have a deep and abiding appreciation of self. That means, you know, if we're going to be powerful, we have to appreciate ourselves, right? That means our men have to appreciate our women. That means our women have to appreciate our men. We have to appreciate each other as brothers, as sisters, and vice versa, right? We have to have that sense of appreciation of self and loving ourselves, okay? Because right now in our community, we don't really have that, right, guys? We don't have that. I was teaching the youth a few years ago, you know, Afrikan Martial Arts, and you know, a couple of the kids got into an argument. They got into a fight, and they were really ready to go to blows about this. Whatever they were arguing about, it was something stupid, right? It doesn't even matter what it was. But I told them, man, you guys are brothers. You know what I'm saying? Like, you have so many enemies out here that don't want you to succeed. Okay? There's so many entities out there that do not want you to succeed, right? You have to understand that the person next to you, right, your spouse, your children, your mother, your father, your brother, those within your community, this is your family, right? And they are dealing with the same challenges you are and the same obstacles and things that don't want you to succeed. They don't want them to succeed either, okay? And so we have to understand that. Right? We have to understand that there's strength in unity. We have to appreciate each other. It says, no people can build or rebuild itself without a class of warriors, right? Without a class of warriors whose strength of character has been handcrafted by them to clear its path and keep that way open, right? So my question to you, is that going to be you? Are you going to be that warrior, right? That class of warriors? Are you going to be a part of that class, or are you just going to be, you know, a civilian, right? You know, is that what you're going to be? And that's cool, kind of, not really, right? If you're just going to be a civilian, but I want to be a warrior, right? I want to be someone who has built something in my lifetime that even when I'm not here anymore, people will say, Brother Rob built that, right? And we have this because of Brother Rob. And because of Brother Rob, you know, I'm able to learn Afrikan martial arts. Because of Brother Rob, I know my history. Because of Brother Rob, I know my culture and where I come from, right? That's what I want people to say about me when my life is over, right? And so that's powerful, right? But it says whose strength of character has been handcrafted by them to clear his path and keep that way open. So it's not just about warriors clearing the path, but it's also about warriors keeping that path open for future generations, right? So it's not just like, okay, we've succeeded. We have whatever our goal is, African unity, liberation, all these things, which is great. But it is about keeping that path open because, you know, the battle for freedom is never won, right? It's ongoing, right? And you have to continually maintain it, right? Even when you achieve it. And so that's something we have not succeeded at. And, you know, we have been freed from chattel slavery, right? The physical enslavement, but where are we mentally, spiritually, economically? You know, I would argue that we're still very much enslaved in many of those areas, okay? But the difference is we don't know it, right? We just don't know it. Most of us don't know it, and most of us like it. Most of us are happy where we are, okay? And that's part of the problem. All right, let's keep it moving. Y'all got me motivated, man. I'm in it, okay? Let's keep it going. It says every warrior's character is a direct reflection of his or her spiritual, psychological, and physical inheritance. Every warrior's character is a direct reflection of his or her spiritual, psychological, and physical inheritance. So what that means is that, so one thing I want to point out is that what he says is spiritual, psychological, and physical inheritance. He didn't say your emotional inheritance. What that means is that it's not about emotion, okay? A lot of us tend to get very emotional about stuff. I talked about this as far as church, right? But the same thing applies to anything else. A lot of times when we first come into consciousness, Pan-Africanism, and we realize who we are and what's happened to us historically, we get righteously angry, right? Of course, naturally and justifiably upset, right, with what has transpired. But what do we do with that anger? It's not just emotion. It is, how do you direct that towards something productive? How do you direct that to building, right? Because really that's what we need to get to. It's not about the stuff on social media. It's not about the talking heads. It's not about the I don't even know what to call it, but a lot of times we get sucked into just listening. It's the same thing as church, right? I mean, it literally is the same thing. I don't want you guys to be churchgoers, okay? I don't want you to go to the church of Rob and be like, yeah, I mean, I love what he said, but I'm not going to do anything about it, okay? I need you guys to take action, okay? So go out today and take action. Go support a Black-owned business. Share this video, right? Share, subscribe, all those kind of things. But beyond that, okay, because it's not really about the social media aspect, I need you to do something physical in your life, in your community. That makes a difference. But he talks about here that we have an inheritance, okay? A warrior's character is a direct reflection of our inheritance. And so there is a spiritual inheritance, psychological, and physical inheritance that you have, that you can access, that you can tap into. But the problem is, most of us are not tapping into that, okay? Why is that? Because the majority of us, the vast majority of us, don't even know that we're African. Okay, that is what it is. That's the bottom line. The vast majority of us don't even know that. Okay, a lot of us are still fighting over who we are. Okay, excuse me. Here's the deal, guys. The reality is you can be foundational Black American, right, and still be African. You can still be more and still be African. You can still be Hebrew Israelite and still be African. You can still be whatever you want to call yourself and still be African. Right? Because ultimately that's where we came from. Whether your ancestors came before Columbus, after Columbus, with Columbus, it doesn't matter if they all came from the continent of Africa. That's it, right? And so what we're trying to say is that, guys, we have an inheritance, right? If your great-great-grandmother, passed away and left you $1 million, right? You're not going to say, oh, I didn't know her. I never, knew who she was. Didn't know her name. I don't want the money. But we got the same thing in our community. We have people of African descent who say, I'm not African. I've never been to Africa. I don't know anything about Africa. Those people don't like me, right? But you have an inheritance there. You have an inheritance, right? Because you are African, whether you no matter what you believe about it, think about it, whatever you think about it, that is what you are, and you have an inheritance there. All we're saying is, go get that check. Go get your inheritance, okay? But most of us are not willing to do that, right? Because we have something of more value on the continent of Africa through our ancestry than the $1 million in the analogy I use with your great-great-grandmother, right? There's something of more value on the continent, and that is our identity. That's our culture. That's who we are, right? Money can't teach you who you are, okay? Right? That is a way more value. Understanding who you are and where you came from, your history, is much greater value than, printed paper, okay? But most of us would rather have the printed paper, and that's the same psychology, right, that led to many of our ancestors being enslaved, right? Because there were people who believed that the material thing was more important than their brother, who believed that the material things were more important than their sister, and they were willing to trade their brother or sister for that material good, right? And sell their brother and sister to Europe, right? It's the same psychology, right? Same thing. All right, let's keep it moving. Y'all got me angry now, okay? But we directing it, okay? All right, it says, no one is separable from the ethical and moral mind of his or her people. All true warriors think, speak, and act out of the genocultural genius bestowed on them through the blood and spirit of their lineage. And so you have to, again, go back and get that. You have genius within you, okay? It's yours. It's your inheritance. It is within you. You've got to think and act from that, but you have to access that. Okay, it's not just something you can just think about and have. You have to train, just like anything else. You got to train, right? You got to train martial arts. You got to train combatives. Okay, you got to train how to fight, defend yourself, right? You have to train the ability to be able to access these kind of things because you, for most of your life, you've not been trained how to do that. You've been taught the opposite, right? How not to access your African genius. And so what we're talking about in Yobè is connecting to your creator, right? Whoever you believe that to be, okay? Connecting to your creator and understanding that your creator created you how you are as a person of African descent, okay? But that is a spiritual inheritance. There's a spiritual connection there. It's not just the color of your skin. It's not just your blood, right? That's not it, okay? I mean, otherwise, why was genealogy so important to the people of the Bible? Right? They knew how important identity was, okay? The ancient Hebrews, they knew how important it was, how important culture was, identity, understanding who they were as a people, right? They worked diligently, not just to maintain their religion, but to maintain their culture, their genealogy. They kept extensive records of that, so they know who's who. Many of you have read those records extensively in the book of Numbers, okay? All right? But it's important from a spiritual context to know who we are and where we come from, okay? Because that is also part of our power, okay? Our spiritual power, psychological, and physical power through our lineage. All right, I'm gonna jump to page 3 here, okay? Guys, almost done. We're almost getting through it, okay? What we wanna cover in this video. It says, we are warriors because we are African, and we have neither the time, energy, nor inclination to play with what it means to be African. This is important because, like I mentioned before, being African means you are already at war in many cases, right? In many regards, because you are born into struggle, right? You were born into this, okay? It's not something you chose, right? You didn't necessarily choose to be at war, right? But we have to decide whether we're going to pick up our tools, whether we're going to pick up and actually fight the war that's being waged, right? And so what we're talking about is, building institutions, right? Spiritual systems, religious systems, the war on our minds, the mental, and the war on our spirits, right? The war that's telling us who we are, our identity, the cultural war, right? These are the kind of things that we're talking about. We have to decide how we want to deal with that. Are we just going to be victims, okay, and just let whatever happens happen? It's too late, okay? Or are we actually going to continue? I know for me, this is something I've thought about, and I think as warriors, you have to kind of have that mindset of like, what if you lose? You know what I mean? Like I think about Malcolm X, right? Or any of our greats who were killed, right? Because of their work, because of what they did. Would they have done anything different? Right? Would they have done anything different, right? If we know that we're going to lose the battle individually, right? And we may even lose the battle collectively, right? There were many, many times that our ancestors fought, right? And rebelled against their enslavers, right? And they lost that battle, okay? They lost that battle, but I don't think they regret the fight, okay? And so we have to kind of think like that as warriors. But to be, as he says, we are warriors because we're African. And so he said we're not going to play what it means to be African, right? So, we have to move beyond this fight, right, between different groups within our community. That is how the battle has been won successfully and fought successfully. I say the battle, not the war, but the battle's been fought successfully against us because we've been divided, right? How was Europe able to enslave nearly the entire continent of Africa? By dividing us, right? By dividing us. And in many cases, our ancestors, we divided ourselves in many cases, right? We fell for that, okay? And so are we going to continue to do that? Are we going to continue to allow ourselves to be divided by class, by FBA, Moor, Hebrew Israelite, and all these other different definitions, and Muslim and religion and Christian? And are we going to let all these kind of things divide us? You know, black men and black women and all this and the other, right? It's nonsense. It's just nonsense, and we're tired of it. I'm tired of it. I'm not having that fight no more, okay? I'm moving on, okay? I'm moving on, and you either coming with me or you can stay behind and keep having those fights, okay? But those of us who know who we are, we're gone, okay? We're going to keep moving because there's a war to fight. We don't have time. Like Baba Baruti says, we don't have time or inclination to have this fight about who's African, who's not African, and this, that, the other thing, or the third, okay? Because while we're debating that, right, our children are going missing, right? Our women, our daughters, our sisters, our wives, mothers, they're going missing, right? So we got to wake up to the reality of where we're at. When you're in a war, when you're in conflict, man, nobody's debating about this kind of stuff, because this is life or death, right? You have to have the back and the side of the person that's next to you, your brother in arms, your sister in arms, right? There's no time for debate. It's too late, okay? So we're moving, okay? Bottom line is we're moving forward. All right. So he says that we leave that to the unanchored paper intellectuals who have nothing better to do with their time but loquaciously entertain each other and play with those validating them. Okay, I'm going to read that again. He's basically saying this whole debate, we leave that to the unanchored paper intellectuals who have nothing better to do with their time but loquaciously entertain each other and play with those validating them. I don't know what that big word means, but I get the gist of what he's saying, right? These paper intellectuals, these talking heads on YouTube, right? Again, I'm going to call them out, right? These guys that have massive followings, you know who they are, right? They're leading these big movements of division. They're leading these big movements of division. Recognize that. Recognize the money that's being made in dividing you as African people. We've always had those who divide us within our community, right? We've always had that, okay? The problem is we never recognize it. And so we need to recognize that, right, as warriors, right? Because warriors fight, okay? We'll let those guys talk, right? But we need to get to work, okay? Because these guys are again, these are the things that are dividing us. These are the things that are keeping us down, okay? And a lot of times this stuff is, we are dividing ourselves because of some illusionary paper reward, right? That may or may not happen. This thing called reparations. We say, oh, when it's time to get the check, I want people to know that, you know, that money's mine. And I want to make sure this other guy over here doesn't get it. Okay, got it. But again, guys, there's no check right now, okay? But I tell you what, we still have a battle that's going on right now. So what are you going to focus on? Are you going to focus on, you know, something that is not even here, right? There's no reparations bill or check or anything else right now physically that is happening, okay? But there is a criminal justice system that's working against us. There is a healthcare system that doesn't support us. There's a religious system that doesn't help us, that disempowers us. There's an education system that is broken, that doesn't teach our kids who they are, right? There's all these problems that are here and now, okay? But we're worried about some potential about a check, okay? Again, as warriors, we don't have time for that, okay? We don't have time for that. And he kind of colludes here. He says, we are our ancestors. There are only, and this is what I want to get to. I kind of want to leave it here. There are no civilians in war, okay? He says it. There's no civilians. All right, so as a person, again, he said earlier that we're warriors because we're African. So you have to decide, right? What are you, okay? Are you ready to be a warrior, okay? Are you ready to build your community? Are you ready to, and I say build, this is physical. It's not emotional. This is not church. This is, are you willing to create something, an institution, build something, a business, a school, institution, something, or support someone who is continuously, consistently? Are you willing to support that, right? Or not? Because there's no civilians in war. There's only warriors, enemies, traitors, okay, and ignorant, shrapnel-impaled bystanders, right? And I think that's where we all have been at some point, right? We've all been those ignorant, shrapnel-impaled bystanders. And you have to decide, guys, are you still going to be that bystander, okay? Because there is stuff, crap's hitting the fan, okay? I don't know if you realize it yet, but crap's hitting the fan. And are you just going to stand behind, okay, and just watch? Okay, you're just gonna look around and you know, keep tabs on your social media and keep strolling, and maybe you're into football or baseball or whatever distraction, entertainment that's distracting you, music or whatever it is, movies, video games. I don't know what your poison is, right? But you're falling into one of these categories, okay? You're one or the other. You're either warrior, right? You're an enemy, okay? Because I know there's enemies watching, right? Maybe you're a traitor, okay? Or maybe you're just that shrapnel-impaled bystander, right? Because no matter if you're a bystander, you're gonna get hurt. Okay, that's what we're saying. Okay, you're a bystander, you're gonna get hurt. Okay, you can't just sit on the sidelines with this, right? It affects you. And I'm talking from personal experience, right? I try to just kind of sit it out, sit on the sidelines, right? Because I was hoping, you know, and I kind of, the way I grew up personally, this is just Brother Rob, the way I kind of grew up, you know, we didn't really talk a lot about racism or systemic racism or this kind of thing in my household, right? I mean, we kind of knew it existed and, you know, familiar with it, right? But it wasn't really emphasized so much, right? So when I get out into the real world, you know, you get out of college, everything's cool right now when you're young, right? And when you're young, everybody's together, you're going to school with the same people and you guys all grow up together. But then once you get out of that environment, and when money's on the line now, then I saw a difference, right? I saw a big difference, okay, in terms of, you know, how things worked for people of African descent and how things work for other folks, right? And so that was my experience, but it was that wake up call, right? Because I wasn't prepared, right? I was that bystander, right? And I got hurt in the process of the bystanding, right? I've shared previously about my experience in church, right? And my religious experience, right? And I got hurt through that experience, okay? Because I was that ignorant, shrapnel-impaled bystander, right? I was an ignorant bystander and I got hurt as a result. And so I had to equip myself with warriorhood. I had to equip myself with these character traits, okay? That didn't happen for me until much, much later in life. And so I want to prevent those things for you, okay? I don't want you to go through that suffering, okay? I don't want you to go through those problems. All right, last bit here. It says, therefore, the correct vision must be encoded into the spirit of the warrior's mission, right? You got to have the correct vision in your mission. We need to know both what to eradicate or subdue and what to rebuild, right? So correct vision. What we're talking about here is you have a mission, right? Every day you wake up, we talk about intention, having intention. Well, your intention is part of that mission, right? You intend to complete some kind of mission for the day, for the week, for the year, for your lifetime, right? But you want to make sure that your mission aligns with your vision, right? So a mission is, of course, you know, more short term, right? And your vision is your long term, right? What you expect or, you know, what you want to see in the future, right? And what you're working towards. And so the key is to make sure those things line up, right? Because again, we want to ensure that we're creating something that is for eternity. You have to think like that. So I'm a spiritual person, and you as an African person, we are spiritual people naturally. There's not a single group of people that is more religious, that goes to church more, that believes more of the Bible than people of African descent. I'm sorry, okay? But by and large, if you look at the statistics, a greater percentage of African descendant people go to church than the other group of people. We believe harder and more than anybody else. But you look at the results of that. What is the result of that faith? Where are we as a result of that faith? Okay? But part of it is because we're off kiltered, right? We're in a system that disempowers us, right? We're in a system that doesn't tell us who we are, doesn't teach us who we are, right? There's a reason for that, okay? The system is working the way it was designed to, okay? It's the religious system is working the way it's designed to. There's a reason why we're not where we're supposed to be. And it's not by coincidence, not by chance. It's by design. All right. This is what it was meant to be. Okay. All right. This is what it has created, and it was meant to create that. So just understand that. It's not an accident. It's not a coincidence that people of African descent suffer in the various ways that we suffer. Okay. Anyway, let's keep moving. All right. So like I said, we need to know both what to eradicate and or subdue and what to rebuild, right? So again, it's about action. If you guys watch the video, take action, do something, support Black-owned businesses, support Black-owned institutions, efforts, right? Things, monetarily support, donate, give money. If you're not sure where to donate, think about, look at things like the Uhuru Academy, Baba Amin, Uhuru Academy. Go look them up. UHURUacademy.com, all right? Uhuru Academy. Uhuru means freedom, okay? Freedom, right? So look up, that's an institution you can support. And there's many others that you can support. That's just one off the top of my head, right? But support these organizations, support the folks that are actually doing the work. And you probably have folks in your community that are doing similar kind of work, right? Urban intellectuals, right? Go buy some Black History flashcards, right? Urbanintellectuals.com. Black History flashcards. It's like, maybe $5-6 or something for a deck of cards, right? You can start teaching Black history, in your community, with your kids, in your family, wherever you happen to be, okay? These are the kind of things you got to do, right? It's just simple things like that that take action, okay? Start doing those kind of things. Those are just some examples. All right, last sentence here, okay? For this, warriors warriors need to not only know our mission, but also the ancestral, eternal vision of our people. Okay, and I'll leave it at that. So what he's talking about here is important for you guys to obviously know your mission, right? The kind of short term, what you're focused on based off your African intent, but it's also important to know your vision, what you're working towards. But all those things must also align with the ancestral vision, right? That our ancestors have for us, right? Because it is all connected, okay? It's all one line, right? It's all one line. It's all connected. So we are our ancestors, just like our future generation will be us. So we're building for generations to come, right? I'm not building for this generation. I'm not building for the next generation. I'm building for, 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe 10 generations from now. That's what I'm building towards, okay? It's towards that kind of level. And that's where our thinking has to be. Because again, this didn't just happen overnight. Right? Things like the Happily Natural Day, right? There's a farm, right? They have farming, right? Black-owned farmers, right? We have to, things like that, getting back to the land. These are things we can support. These are things that we can, give money to and donate to. That's what I'm asking you to do. That's the action I'm taking. I'm asking you to take. So if you don't get anything out of this video, give some money to a Black-owned institution today, okay? Give something, donate something today. I'm gonna do it, okay? Just because I believe in doing what I say, okay? So I'm gonna do that, and I want you guys to do the same thing as well. Again, please share the video, subscribe, and we'll see you guys shortly in part 2, okay? I don't know the periodicity we're gonna do this, right? It's gonna be at least every week, okay? But I'm gonna try to pump out maybe 2 to 3 a week, something like that. This is a phenomenal book. Make sure you guys go to aquabenhouse.com to pick this up. Again, it's all about us supporting us.
The purpose of our organization is to start right here in Harlem, which has the largest concentration of people of African descent that exists anywhere on this earth. There are more Africans here in Harlem than exist in any city on the African continent, because that's what you and I are, Africans.